My son's bride texted me, "For the vibe, please don't come," as if I were just clutter on their perfect day. My hands trembled, but years of building this vineyard steadied me. I saved the message, not my tears. Quietly, I unlocked the safe and placed the deed copies on my desk, letting the paper breathe while I stayed silent. They had no idea that the mother they erased owned the very ground they stood on, and this story was only beginning. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The message landed while the kettle hissed. My kitchen smelled like toast and early grapes, and the hairline crack around my porcelain cup shone like a faded ring. The phone lit my palm. Riva, my son's bride. 10 words neat as a blade. For the vibe, please don't come. I read it once, then again, refusing to translate or soften it in my head. No emojis, no apology, no room left for a mother. I took a breath the vines could recognize, slow and steady the way we wait out frost. I pressed save on the screenshot, watched the timestamp settle like dust. My cup touched the saucer with a small, hollow note. I did not answer. 40 years of keeping a family standing has taught me that haste is a poor witness. I wiped the counter, set the phone face down, and let the sentence keep its shape. If a door was closing, I would watch the hinges. Outside, Silverado Trail opened to a pale, waiting sun. The planner called before the kettle cooled. "This is Carol," she began, voice crisp, friendly, in the way paperwork is friendly. "I'm confirming that you won't be attending." Not a question. Confirmation. She moved on to deposits retainers, the non-refundable bits the valley runs on. I pulled my leather notebook from the drawer and dated the page, May 24th, 8:12 a.m., and wrote her words exactly. No adjectives, no feelings. When she paused for breath, I asked for an email confirming the same, her name and the footer timestamp intact. Of course, she said, relieved to be dealing with a reasonable adult. I thanked her, kept my tone level, and declined the invitation to argue with someone hired to make weekends smooth. She did not know the house she'd called belonged to the vineyard they had booked, or that I'd paid the chef she listed. To her, I was a line item with a difficult edge. That was fine. Line items leave a trail. I have learned to let quiet carry teeth. I pulled a manila folder from the bottom drawer and wrote in block letters across the tab, "Trust and Contracts." The Sharpie bled a little. Good. I slid the screenshot in, then the notes with Carol's exact phrasing. I set a kitchen timer for 3 hours to remind me to log any calls I might get, because memory tries to be generous when it should be precise. The cup's crack caught light like a faint scar. I made a rule for the house: no outgoing calls while my heart is loud. Only paper moves when I'm burning. Everything in this valley knows cycles how to hold still until the next right task. I brewed tea and sat with my hands flat on the table, letting my pulse drop back into its lane. The day could race without me. I would set the pace by where the signatures lived, not where someone's taste wanted them to be. Dignity first, then motion. Night comes. By noon, I unlocked the floor, safe behind the pantry flower. The dial's click echoed the years we've kept this place steady. Inside, copies of the Trust All Vendor Master Agreements and a page titled Authorized Signer with my name printed once and signed twice, one for the vineyard, one for the inn. I read trustee clause aloud to put steel in the air, full authority to contract, suspend, and enforce services to protect brand and guest experience. Legalese with a firm spine. I laid the documents on the table and photographed them well dated. The folder grew heavier with every sheet, not with anger, but with gravity. I dialed Marcia, the attorney, who watched me learn to move ink like levers. 5 minutes. "Do you still hold signature authority?" she asked. I read the section. "Yes." "Then let the paperwork speak," she said. "No threats, no speeches. Send what applies. If they escalate, we escalate." We set a morning meeting, 10:30 a.m. at my office above lobby. I returned the originals to the safe, spun the dial, and let the click settle now. Afternoon light slid down the cabinets like a measured hand. I opened a fresh legal pad and drew 4 columns, ruler straight. Time caller. Exact words. File ref. I printed the photo of the kitchen clock and taped it to the top corner for discipline. Evidence lives better with a spine and a place to sit. In a neat block, I wrote the 3 sentences I would use until this was finished. Please email that. Refer to contract section X. I'll get back to you after review. I named the digital folder Evidence Ledger, then mirrored it. No posts, no texts to mutual friends, no leaning on my son to fix what he did not design. I poured water, set the cracked cup beside the folder, and stood still until my shoulder muscles loosened. Once years ago, a late frost threatened the buds, and we saved them by waiting to act until wind shifted. The valley respects timing. So do I. By 5, I had a list of questions for tomorrow's meeting numbered and short: how to notify vendors, what to freeze, what to let run, what silence to practice. The house made its small evening sounds, and I answered none of them. All backed up. Night came quiet and even. I stepped onto the porch and watched the line of headlights moving along Silverado Trial. I called Marcia and left a short voicemail documents, ready meeting set, requesting a review of trustee enforcement options. No anger in my voice, no explanations, only nouns that travel well. I set the phone face down on the rail. I lifted the cracked cup. The flaw shone like a seam. I tidied the table, turned off the kettle, and locked the office door. By morning now, I would walk into my own hotel lobby and let the printer tell them what my voice did not. The Mission Revival lobby of my inn holds morning like a bowl terracotta tile lemon oil coffee. I arrived with my folder tucked to my ribs and the cracked cup wrapped in a towel inside my purse. A talisman, not a weapon. Darlie Monroe was already at the counter, pearls bright as if they had opinions. She smiled at the clerk the way people do when they think rules are furniture you can move. Let's streamline contacts, she said. Family decisions need one voice. I stood 1 pace back, hands folded. The clerk glanced at me, then at the monitor. Paperwork began to print. Authorized contact, signature authority. My name. Trustee. Non-transferable without written consent. I didn't speak. I watched the page land face up on marble as soft as a gavel. Gannon Ruiz, our general manager, stepped from his office tie, a little loose posture knot. He rested a fingertip on the claw's footer. No third-party instruction valid without trustee approval. He read calm as a staff meeting. He offered Carol a copy for her file, invited Darlie to sit while we confirm process. I remained standing. Darlie said, "The family agrees." Gannon didn't argue. "We follow paper," he answered and nodded to the clerk. No one was rude. Policy did the talking. I left the lobby with nothing said that could be twisted and everything stamped that could be enforced. Upstairs, sunlight spread across the glass-walled boardroom. Vines ran in neat rows down the hill, patient as old truths. Marcia Chen set 3 documents side by side, her pen aligned like a compass needle. Option 1, she said, suspend operations pending verification. Option 2, void unauthorized instructions. Option 3, hold a defamation claim in reserve. She asked one question only: what keeps you honest with yourself? I chose the smallest lever with the clearest teeth. We pause, I said. No shouting. Paper first, Marcia drafted a concise order. Gannon prepared a distribution list. Carol would be copied as planner of record. A lever does not have to be loud to move weight. Emails left like birds from a wire. Subject: temporary suspension. Pending verification. Keating Ridge events. Housekeeping froze room blocks. The kitchen schedule went gray. Tasting appointments clicked to hold. Carol replied, received. Darlie forwarded from a personal account. This is unnecessary, but cited nothing. I didn't reply all. I archived and tagged. I texted my son only, we're pausing until the record is correct. No sermon. The valley has a sound when operations halt quiet that isn't silence, like a stage waiting for the curtain to rise on the right scene. I opened my evidence ledger and logged the lobby interaction, the printout, the send times. Beside the lines, I wrote 3 fixed answers underlined. Please email that. Refer to section X. We'll move when verification is complete. I would not post. I would not call cousins. For myself, I sketched 3 paths for the couple. Path A, simple ceremony. Elsewhere. No interference, no funds. Path B, proceed here with a written apology and correct acknowledgement. Path C, cancellation, with a polite statement of schedule conflict. Boundaries in ink. My side of the street swept no debris for later. Word travels faster than vans. By mid-afternoon, Darlie told anyone who would listen she would move the wedding across the valley. Vendors wrote back to Gannon with acknowledgments like weather reports. Marcia placed a morning check-in on my calendar. I walked past the tasting room without stopping. The vines looked exactly the same as yesterday, which is the mercy of agriculture. Living things ignore our dramatics and do their work. At my desk, I set the cracked cup down the hairline visible like a river on an old map. I breathed once deep and kept my hands off the phone. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. Procedure spoke in my stead, and the building seemed to breathe easier. I shut down my computer, locked the boardroom, and crossed the lobby. Darlie sat near the fireplace, scrolling thumbs quick. She looked up as I passed, smile polished back onto her face. "We'll sort this," she said, like a promise or a warning. "By the book," I answered. Outside afternoon poured over Silverado Trail. Somewhere a bottling line clanked steady as a metronome. I drove home at the kind of speed that keeps your heartbeat company. At the kitchen table, I brewed tea, set the cracked cup on its saucer, and opened my laptop. A notification floated up from a cousin's cousin, a pretty image of a seating chart in blush ink, our vineyard logo faint in the corner. My eyes found the margin. My name was gone trimmed as neatly as a hangnail. The comments arrived on schedule, so elegant, so intimate. Love the minimalist look. Minimalism is easy when gratitude has been edited out. I didn't type that. I saved the image with the timestamp labeled the file and closed the computer. The house made its small evening noises, the refrigerator cycling a branch, tapping the porch rail, the kettle's soft hum as it cooled. I closed the lid and let silence hold this room. Tomorrow is for paper schedules, clauses, signatures, so no one mistakes quiet for surrender. By nightfall, the first cropped photo would appear, my name trimmed from the seating chart as neatly as a margin. The link opened to a pretty photograph and a small cruelty. A seating chart, all calligraphy and peonies, stopped just short of the words that should have named me. Someone had cropped the frame so neatly you could taste the intention. No mother of the groom, no Velma, just space where I belonged. I printed the image at the kitchen table, set the page beside my cracked cup, and wrote the time in my ledger. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a held breath. I did not call anyone. I did not plead context. I stapled the URL and the timestamp to the corner and slid the paper under the cup so porcelain touched paper, proof touching proof. Shock has an edge. Mine shaved me steady. I read the post twice more, resisting the old habit of softening what hurt. The letters stayed gone. Outside, early swallows stitched the air over the vines. I breathed with them in and out until my hands remembered work. Then I opened the evidence notebook, drew a thin box, and labeled it Platform, Handle, Time, Text, Image, Hash. My pen did not shake. The insult was now a record, and records, unlike people, do not argue back. By noon, the comments began migrating like birds, and the phone rang with a tone I knew. Kirill, the planner, was careful. Just checking alignment, she said her vowels polished. She never mentioned the post. Instead, she asked to confirm that communication will continue through the bride's side. I sat at my kitchen desk and uncapped my pen. "Please email that," I said. I wrote her exact words, the time, and the caller ID. When she referenced a non-refundable retainer, I noted the clause number from our master agreement. I requested a written confirmation and ended the call before my breath could harden into heat. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it S5. Screenshots slid into place one by one, each saved with the platform, the handle, and the minute. Documentation has a sound, tiny clicks that add weight without noise. I emailed her again. "Please maintain a copy of the original seating artwork you provided. No accusation, only preservation. The kitchen clock ticked twice, dignity measured in seconds. Near dusk, a private message arrived from a name I recognized only from email footers Shanda Reed, the planner's assistant. Her note was spare. She had seen the cropped image circulating and wanted me to have the original export for my records. Attached were 2 files, the full seating chart, where mother of the groom Velma Keating rested in ink, and a changelog listing an external request, minimize family politics in visuals. Nothing more. No adjectives. No apology, only the clean line of provenance. I thanked her with 2 sentences. Please send via email for my counsel and consent noted to share with my attorney. She replied within 5 minutes, forwarding the files from her work account with timestamps visible. I saved them to S5 and mirrored them to a drive labeled Trust. The kitchen light buzzed faintly. My hands remembered the weight of bottle labels and harvest logs. Paper has always told me how to stand. Tonight, it told me to stay still and let the trail of metadata breathe. I did not ask her to take sides. People need their jobs more than they need my vindication. Truth, if tended, grows roots on its own. I pressed the staples flat and closed the folder. The next morning, the phones behaved like weather. A cousin, a neighbor, a woman I had not seen since Jasper's Little League called to ask if I was canceling the wedding out of spite. I answered each with the 3 lines I had written for myself. Please email that. Refer to contract section X. Will move when verification is complete. I did not petition the past or defend my name. I wrote the times. When the quiet returned, I went outside and pruned a row of roses, clipping just above the outward bud so the next growth would face light. The simple task drew the hum out of my chest. Thorns made sense. They were honest about what they were. Back inside, I exported another PDF bundle with the morning screenshots and labeled it S5D. I texted Lyle only once I saw a cropped chart circulating. We'll let documents speak. He replied with an ellipsis, then nothing. I wrote the exact minute and closed the notebook gently. Outside the window, pickers moved along a training wire 2 hills over, steady as a second hand. I matched their rhythm, pouring feed for the hens. Routine steadies what rumor rattles. By afternoon, a wedding blog wrote to request comment on the controversy at Keating Ridge. I forwarded the note to Marcia with the S5 bundle and Shanda's chain of documents. Within the hour, Marcia replied directly to the blogger with a paragraph as crisp as a court caption. Future inquiries to counsel. Publication of false statements about my role or authority may constitute defamation. Any misrepresentation of brand affiliation or event control will be addressed through available remedies. She added 1 line to me, only no oxygen. I read it twice, then archived the thread. The story wanted a flame. We gave it a pane of glass. The blog pinged once more for a quote. Silence held. I wrote the final time and filed the request under S23. Boundaries are not doors slammed. Sometimes they are velvet ropes around a history you refuse to let strangers bruise. I made tea and stood by the back door until steam cleared my lenses. In the yard, the wind lifted the laundry line shirt, sailing without destination, then settling clean. Near evening, a cousin of the bride posted a rehearsal mock-up of photo backdrop with my vineyard's crest centered above their names like a sponsor stamp. No permission line, no credit. I saved the image, hashed it, and logged the entry platform handle time file name. On a sticky note, I wrote trademark letter and pressed it to the folder. The cracked cup went back on top as if keeping watch. I set a morning call with Marcia and turned off porch light. We had moved from cropping a name to borrowing a Mark II forms of the same disrespect. I signed the trademark letter in the boardroom where the glass walls hold the valley like a map. Marcia read each line again, short and exact, naming the border we would enforce no use of the Keating Ridge crest on backdrops, posts, mock-ups, or anything that pretended we were a sponsor. I initialed the margins. Gannon checked the distribution list, tapping keys with the patience of a winemaker. No adjectives, I reminded myself. Correct, don't punish. At 9:18 a.m., the letter left my outbox with read receipts live. We cited clauses everyone signs and rarely thinks about brand affiliation, art license, scope of use. I took a photo of the send screen, filed it to my evidence ledger, and set the cracked cup on top. I did not think of Riva or of Lyle. I thought of the crest my husband drew on a napkin 29 years ago, and how it has kept our roof standing. The letter was not a threat. It was a fence finally visible. It set the line calm as a fence post sunk in dry summer soil. Elise Park called Gannon first, then asked to place me on speaker. Her voice had the crisp distance of someone who protects names for a living. She thanked us for the clarity, confirmed the screenshot we attached, and said their company would withdraw any implied co-sponsorship of the backdrop. No dispute, no sputter, just reputational hygiene. I thanked her for the professional courtesy and asked for an email confirming what she'd just said. Gannon logged the call in operations. I noted the minute in my ledger. Elise clarified that their purchase order would stand only for wholesale florals already delivered. Any item labeled Crest Wall would be canceled, and no logo of theirs would appear within a breath of ours. After she hung up the decor, vendor wrote short and clean, "We'll remove the crest from the mock-up." I stood at the window and watched a forklift move quietly across the loading yard as if even the machines preferred not to be part of gossip. The letter had been attached to a keystone, and gravity did the rest. In the loading corridor, 2 staff rolled the silver frame, backward wheels whispering over concrete. I didn't stop them. I didn't supervise. I took note of the time and the arc the frame made as it turned the corner. Kirill messaged that the bride's family was upset and asked whether the removal could be reversed. One line back from me, once licensing is corrected, send the revised proof. The sentence fit like a bolt. I walked past the tasting room without stepping in. You could taste June already in the air, warm and a little sweet, the kind that forgives rash words if you let it. I set the printed mock-up with the crest in my ledger next to the revised file, with the crest gone. The boardroom felt larger somehow when unauthorized things left it. I neither gloated nor lingered. I signed a maintenance request for the corridor light that flickered, then moved the day forward. I kept pace. At 3 o'clock, the boardroom glass was cool under my palms. Carol sat across from me, phone face down. I placed 3 cream envelopes on the table and aligned them as if they were place cards. Option A. I said, sliding the first to her, cancellation with refund per contract. It released all vendors and room blocks. I understand, she said, not looking up. Option B, I continued, independent ceremony. They would manage their own venue elsewhere. There would be no contribution from me and no interference from me. Kirill nodded once. Option C. I said, tapping the 3rd Keating Ridge as scheduled. It required a written apology before the ceremony and a public acknowledgement at the reception of my role, a single point of contact policy, and no conflicting vendor instructions. Each envelope held dates, deposit math, and an operational checklist. I spoke once per option and then went quiet. Gannon entered, placed copies, and left. Marcia reviewed the deadline. Saturday, May 31st, 5 p.m. I'll deliver these, Kirill said finally, her voice even. Please confirm receipt by each party in writing, I answered. When she stood, the room felt lighter the way a barrel lightens after racking. My phone lit up darly long paragraphs asking me to reconsider. I closed the screen without replying. I printed the deadline notice, slid it under the cracked cup, and wrote the time. The room held its breath. Choices waited. Marcia filed the notice of the 5 o'clock decision deadline to all parties. Gannon programmed an auto-cancel trigger if no signed selection arrived. I texted Lyle one sentence, choose what you can live with, not what looks easy today. He wrote back, I need time. I did not negotiate there. I printed the deadline notice and slid it beneath the cracked cup the way you press a leaf under glass so it keeps its shape. I added entries to the ledger for the sponsor call the backdrop removal and the envelopes meeting. I stood at the window and watched a line of guests check in for other weekends, a reminder that the world keeps moving, whether we draft or doubt. When the kettle clicked a second time, I turned it off and left the cup empty. Boundaries, then patience, then sleep. I chose quiet. I stood in the boardroom at dusk, 3 empty envelope slots in my case. My phone lay face down. Rehearsal playlists were being edited somewhere. The printer tray did not stir. Paper had spoken. Gravity obeyed. Tomorrow, character would be asked to speak. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and let silence finish the meeting. The valley held. Morning came like a hand on my shoulder, not a trumpet. Light crossed the kitchen tile and settled on the ledger Maura set on my table, the old book with Daniel's penciled rows and weather marks. She arrived with the day's first wind still in her hair, smelling of cane tie and eucalyptus. We didn't speak for a while. I poured tea into my cracked cup, and she traced the margin where Daniel had written 2 words during the frost year we thought might break us. Hold fast. She didn't point at me or the wedding. She closed the book, then opened it again, and the room breathed with us. The day would try to pull me into theater. I chose pages and policy instead. We walked the lower slope together, rows 12 through 14, where the trellis cuts the early sun into even ladders. Riva and the planner were doing a sight pass. I kept to the grass edge 1 pace back. Maura opened the ledger to that same page, not as proof, but as a story. The weak ice saddled the canes, and the crew wanted to run. Daniel wrote "Hold fast," lit the smudge pots, and stood until dawn. Sometimes staying is braver than storming. Maura said voice even. Riva didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She asked softly, "May I take a photo of that?" Maura nodded. Riva framed the margin where the pencil had dug a little deeper and took the picture. Roots before rumor. I nodded. The house quieted around that ink. Back in the kitchen, I set the ledger on the runner and made 3 rules I could live by when the air got thin. I wrote them on an index card small enough to hide under the saucer. 1. Tell the truth about funding and authority. 2. A seat by name, not as escort. 3. 1 point of contact, no back-channel directives. I texted Lyle a single line. When you're ready to be a husband, truth must go first. No follow-up, no lecture. I turned the phone face down and slid the card beneath the ledger beside the cracked cup. Policy beside history. If anyone wanted my position, it would be written down. By noon, an email chimed from downtown Napa. Chandra Rao, the officiant, had reviewed the suspension notice and the contracts. Her message was 1 sentence clean as a bell. I will not officiate a ceremony that erases the truth of who made this day possible. No italics, no sermon. She asked for assurance that acknowledgments would be accurate, or she would withdraw. I breathed once and typed back, "Thank you for your ethical clarity. Attached are the clauses. I have copied the planner for alignment. Paper aligned with conscience." The room felt cooler. Carol replied within the hour. "We can seek a substitute officiant." The sentence looked reasonable until you set it next to the county calendar in the license window. I answered with dates, lead times, and risk. "Possible, but likely to delay," I wrote. A minute later, Darley's text arrived, "This is getting ridiculous," and I let it sit where it landed. I forwarded both messages to my evidence ledger, added time subject attachments. Lyle sent a gray bubble that never resolved into words. I logged that too. Silence has a timestamp. I returned to the sink and rinsed the cup until the crack caught light like a thin river on stone. Afternoon settled. The valley hummed at its pitch. I pulled the ledger toward me and read old notes about broken pump belts and a harvest brought in by headlights. None of it was pretty. All of it was true. Truth is not a performance, Daniel used to say. It's a practice. I wiped a tea ring from the table and thought about seats and names about who gets to exist, where they have paid and worked and bled. I am not the first mother folded out of a frame, and I won't be the last, but I am a trustee. And trustees do not argue with rumor. They answer with records. I stacked contracts by date and breathed until the shake in my hands went back to hiding. Near dusk, Maura texted Bride, asked to borrow the ledger page. The sentence did not ask me to guess motive. It asked whether trust was still a tool in a house that needs every decent tool it can find. Yes, I wrote on one condition, it returns before sunrise. She answered with a thumbs up, and a minute later a photo of the page tucked into a plastic sleeve. I set the cracked cup on the empty rectangle where it had rested. The cup looked like a missing tooth and a promise. Emails continued to move like distant freight. The planner tested times. An aunt asked in a chain whether I was still canceling things. I did not repeat myself. Please email that. Refer to Section X. We will move when verification is complete. The words look cold to people who prefer warm noise, but warm noise got us cropped from a chart. Cold clarity took a backdrop down without a single raised voice. I kept my eye on the place where the ledger page had been. Leaving something valuable out in the world is an act of faith. Sometimes it is the only act left. The house went quiet in the way a field does when the heat breaks. I set the 3-line card on top of the cover and turned off the kitchen light. In the window, the rows held their geometry against the last blue. Somewhere, a rehearsal script was being rearranged to remove what would not fit the brand of love they hoped to sell. I am not a brand. I am a woman who paid the invoices when other people were asleep. I locked the back door, checked the safe, and laid the folder by the front shoe bench. I slept the way you sleep before weather shallow aware. When the phone vibrated at 5, it was only the irrigation timer. I made coffee, warmed the cup, and looked at the clock. In an hour, Maura would be at the gate, either with a page or with another kind of news. Either way, I had work set out. Answer, counsel, confirm scheduling, and write down whatever words the day tried to burn off the page. Theo called me to the back office just after 8. The AP screen on his monitor had gone crimson around a florist invoice, a red square that meant stop and look again. He tapped the row with a knuckle. An upgrade had been coded as house courtesy, my initials pre-filled, as if a polite forgery had already shaken my hand. I let the first rise of anger pass through like a summer gust and asked for the raw audit, the original purchase order, and every email string tied to the line. Theo nodded, already exporting to a folder he named with the date and time. I wrote those numbers in my ledger and underlined them once. The facts were already building their own spine. In the conference nook, we laid 2 scopes side by side. The original plan read like a sensible garden. Seasonal stems glassware we keep in inventory linens. We know how to launder on a busy weekend. The upgrade added imported gardenias, at rush rates a Crest Gobo wash that had no license, and an aisle runner magically relabeled as a sponsor, courtesy. There was no sponsor. Elise had withdrawn last week without fuss or headlines, and I had thanked her for clarity. Courtesy here was a new coat of paint over cost. I drew a pencil line under the clause that requires owner approval for any free branding comps or promotional swaps. Theo printed the page and slid it into a clear sleeve. Paper once gathered becomes its own kind of voice. I called the florist on speaker with Theo present. I read each line item and the contract language the way other people quote hymns. The owner cleared his throat and said almost cheerfully that the bride's mother confirmed these were covered by the house. I did not explain family to a vendor. I said only, please send that authorization in writing bearing my signature. The silence that followed felt like a hallway with every door shut. He promised to check with staff and send the trail. We ended without argument. I followed with a 2-sentence email the invoice was on administrative hold. We would release payment when the requested documents arrived. Nothing more, nothing less. Minutes later, a reply all arrived with an attachment that should have been scrubbed. A junior coordinator named Luna had pasted a screenshot of their internal chat. The thread showed Darlie pushing for the upgrades under house courtesy, and then a tidy line that stung because it was so casual. She won't show, planner says, not expected, just bill it to the venue. Another message proposed changing the contact to Darlie to avoid drama. I did not respond. I downloaded the image, saved the headers, and added a hash value to my ledger. When people treat procedure as decoration, it will eventually speak on its own. Here, it was speaking. I walked to the small window over the loading court. A van idled while 2 workers stacked broken-down crates, their hands quick and ordinary. A crow scolded from the fence and hopped down to peck at a ribbon. The world, stubborn as ever, kept its rhythm. I forwarded the AP export, the original scope, the altered line, and the chat capture to Marcia. 10 minutes later, she returned a narrow packet, a notice of misrepresentation to the vendor, a directive to restore scope, a reminder that owner authorization is required for comps and branding, a warning that further misrepresentation would trigger remedies under contract. Gannon sent it to the florist and copied the planner. We did not include family. This was a matter between a house and a supplier, not a stage for anyone's feelings. Before noon, the florist acknowledged receipt. They rolled the plan back and issued a corrected invoice that looked like the first one had been brushed and set straight. Theo lifted the hold and annotated the reversal time in the system. I added a line in my ledger document title, invoice number, change description, operator initials. I drew a square beside it I could color in once every piece was filed where it belonged. Order is not applause. It is breath returning to a room. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Lyle. I watched the little red icon settle and did not press play. There are things a son will say when he is afraid of conflict that he does not mean to carve into his mother's chest. There are things a mother must hear only when she can lay them on paper and not let them live in her blood. Instead, I met Gannon at the lobby console. We opened the system that governs access lists, room blocks, vendor contacts, and the authority matrix that says who can speak for my house. I read the owner override protocol out loud and asked him to proceed. He restored a single point of contact, set my name where it had always belonged, and locked out substitutes unless I cleared them in writing. Gannon printed the new contact sheet and placed it on the counter between us. Front desk events, kitchen AV, all routed to the trustee, he said, tapping each column. I initialed and signed, then smiled because it felt like fastening a seatbelt before a steep hill. He programmed the audit ping I requested anytime someone tried to change the contact or commit comped product. Without my authorization, the system would log it and send a short neutral notice. No stern language, no theater, just the sound of nuts and bolts turning in a frame. We filed copies with operations, placed a set at the front desk, and uploaded a PDF to the internal portal. If anyone wanted to speak for my house, they would find a locked door with my name on it and a bell they could ring. The afternoon stretched warm and honest. I walked the short path behind the inn and put my hand on the post at row 12, where the new growth wears a tender shine. Years ago, Daniel wrote on this ledger, "Hold fast." He never meant clutching at people. He meant staying with your work when the wind wants to take it. Back in the kitchen, I took the ledger from the counter and ran a thumb across that note until the paper warmed. Then I finally listened to Lyle's message. His voice was careful, softened for effect. "Mom, let's keep this light. It's for the vibe." A child's word in a grown mouth. He wanted the day to weigh nothing so it would not bend him. I deleted the message and wrote the time it had arrived instead. Night pulled the room into itself. I set a morning check with Marcia to confirm the language for vendor communications and to make sure tomorrow's deliveries match the restored scope. I texted Gannon a simple line, "Reconfirm owner override at opening." He replied with a thumbs up I could almost hear. I turned my phone face down. In the quiet, the building seemed to remember the name of its owner, the way a field remembers rain. Paper had grown teeth. Tomorrow, the walls would feel the bite. I slid the corrected invoice under my cracked cup and shut off the kitchen light. The work at last was speaking in my voice without me having to raise it. Sunlight washed the lobby's tile in a pale gold when I met Gannon at the front desk. Devin, our systems admin, slid his keycard and woke the console into admin mode. The screen bloomed with grids, vendors, rooms, deliveries, permissions, every square, a decision someone had tried to make for me. Devin tapped, waited, tapped again. I stood with my hands folded, reading each line before I nodded. We changed the authorized contact matrix so every message flowed to one address, routed to me and to Gannon. The building learned to answer with one voice, not a chorus, tuned by convenience. In the vendor portal, Devin trimmed access like a careful gardener. Carol stayed planner of record, but she could no longer alter financial fields or create credits. Darley's guest login lost its edit privileges. Password resets pointed back to the trustee alias. Delivery windows were reissued from the inn, not the bridal party. I signed an operations directive with a pen that had lived on this counter longer than most marriages last. Devon saved the file date and time-stamped and mirrored it to the backup server. Systems clicked into the shape of the truth. We moved to rooms. Hidden favors showed up as soft gray boxes suites, held for family courtesy, keyed around the contract. We released them all. One remained for the couple because generosity should still feel like generosity, not a lever. Key encoding changed next. Any new access list would need my initials. The system would flag attempts to add a Monroe family master. The screen blinked once accepted the rule, and quiet settled over the console the way it settles over a vineyard after the tractor's shut down work still present, noise removed. I drafted a staff bulletin in the plainest language I knew. Coordination was being consolidated to reduce confusion. No names, no heat. Gannon read it aloud, line by line, as if checking irrigation valves. We sent it posted, one printed copy in the operations office, and filed a clean PDF for the record. Kirill replied, "Received." Darley forwarded it with the words, "This is controlling to 3 people who didn't need it." I archived the forward, wrote the timestamp in my ledger, and let the paper answer what my temper wanted to. By late morning, the phones sounded different. Fewer calls came through, and the ones that did were shorter, the kind that end with "understood." Housekeeping exhaled. The kitchen managers stopped looking over their shoulders. Procedure is a soft thing until it touches wood and glass and salaries, then it feels like shelter. I walked the corridor and nodded hello to a server polishing stemware. He didn't know what had changed. He only knew that something had. At home, the kitchen light fell across the cracked cup like a crescent moon. I pressed play on the voicemail I had saved from my son. His voice was gentle the way boys sound when they want the world to lift its eyes from them. "Mom, let's keep this light. Sarah's upset. We just want the day to feel easy. It's for the vibe." Between the words sat the old request, "Let them save face even if it costs truth." I didn't call back. I wrote his sentence exactly as spoken beside the time. I set the phone face down and let the silence keep its edge. Near dusk, Gannon texted a photo from the front desk printer, an early draft of the seating list proofed by the planner's intern. Next to my name was a word I did not recognize as mine escort. David, the junior clerk, had circled it with a pen and left the copy in the tray. Underneath, he had written, "Mother of the groom is a role." Gannon's message read, "Do you want me to address this?" Now I typed back 3 words. Hold, save copy. At the lobby console the next morning, David waited with the printout protected in a clear sleeve. He pointed to the title line and lifted his eyes to meet mine. "We guard names like we guard keys," he said, borrowing my phrase from training. I thanked him. We filed the draft, notified the planner to correct the label, and updated the proof control, so no version could be swapped without our initials. It was a small hinge, but doors swing on small hinges. Paper had moved the building. The building, in turn, had steadied the people who work inside it. I made tea, set the cracked cup on the ledger's edge, and listened to the quiet tick of the kitchen clock. The day would bring more edits, more polite asks, more attempts to sand off the truth in the name of ease. I could live without ease. What I would not live without was accuracy. By noon, a breeze pushed through the screen and carried the faint smell of cut grass. Systems held. My son did not call. That was mercy, too. Some conversations ripen on the vine. Some fall green and never sweeten. I rinsed the cup, dried it with a towel that had lost its border years ago, and placed it back in its place. Tomorrow, the front desk would take down another draft, and the word escort would come off the page like dust beneath a clean cloth. That night, I sat with the ledger open to Daniel's neat script and traced the groove of his fountain pen. He wrote instructions for storms as if he knew I would need them for people. Hold fast, he'd said in 1998 when sleet took the lower Chardonnay. Hold fast when a partner leaves, when a son forgets who steadied the ladder. The page smelled of dust and eucalyptus. I closed the book and felt the weight move from my chest back into spine where it belonged. A hawk traced a circle over lower vines while I stood at sync. It did not hurry. It trusted airhold, let systems lift, let words wait till paper invites them. Let sun come as man, not a boy asking me to make truth small. I kept faith. David slid the ceremony program draft across the marble as the lobby clocks touched 10. Beside my seat number sat a word that did not belong to me, escort. He tapped the small footer where our new bulletin lived use canonical roles, no courtesy euphemisms. The tile was cool under my palms. I did not argue. I drew a neat circle around mother of the groom, wrote my initials in the margin, and handed back the pen. David logged the edit in the incident system printer tray, clicking as it accepted the revision. Policy and paper began to breathe the same air. I noticed my reflection in the brass bell, older, yes, but steady. The screen showed my name spelled correctly, a small mercy that never stops mattering. I kept my voice in my pocket. The rule here was simple. Let the building speak first. David glanced up, waiting to see if I would storm. I smiled instead. Ink does not need volume to carry weight. David dialed the planner while Gannon stood a half step back, listening the way farmers listen to irrigation valves, ears open for leaks. Per venue bulletin 10.5, David said evenly roles must reflect legal and relational truth for access control. Through the tiny speaker, Kirill asked to keep escort. Her voice was dipped in honey. It's gentler, she offered. David kept his eyes on the screen. For security and accuracy, the listed role must be Mother of the Groom Velma Keating. Please resend the program file. He sent a red line while I said nothing. Gannon confirmed that print approval now routed through the trustee alias. Carol conceded. Seconds later, Darley replied, all from her phone, industry standard says, escort. No one engaged. The ticket would close only when the corrected file arrived. David added with the same calm he used for fire drills that the word controlled access and access controlled liability. Names are doors, he said. We keep the right ones open. I noted the timestamp in my pocket notebook and slid the pencil back into its loop. In the print room, the queue halted the old batch midstream. A new proof slid out warm toner scent, lifting like toast. Mother of the Groom Velma Keating. It read clean and ordinary as a fence post. I initialed the corner. David pinned the approved slip to the stack and archived the voided pages per procedure, a small burial that required no words. 10 minutes, zero theatrics. The machine hummed. Authority arrived in ink, not volume. On a shelf sat a box of spare ribbons from my husband's years. I touched the lid. He believed in checklists and straight lines and in letting documents carry heat so people did not have to. The proof cooled under my hand. Outside, a tour group laughed and moved on. None of them would ever know how quietly a single word had been taken down today. That is the best way for truth to travel here. Quiet shoes, steady light, a paper trail that endures after tempers and playlists change. I signed the print log and dated it in the neat block letters Daniel taught me. Walk with me, David said. He led me to the staff annex where a corkboard sat beneath a strip of fluorescent buzz. At the top, someone had lettered, Who We Serve. He thumbtacked a small training sheet he'd built, Names or Access. Beneath it, he pinned a mini proof of the corrected seating page with my role highlighted, and then a clipped line from our founder's ledger in Daniel's hand, Hold fast. A housekeeper pausing with a bundle of towels looked up and nodded. She had trained under my husband. She remembered the days he taught new hires to speak softly and file promptly. I thanked David. No speech. A thank you has more weight when it refuses to become a ceremony. His smile was young and proud. It made me miss early versions of my son, the boy who once labeled his school folders with a ruler's edge and asked if straight lines could be learned. They can. You repeat them until the hand remembers. The corkboard took on the look of a small chapel work names and a sentence about staying when wind argues for running. We returned to the counter. Darlie arrived the way press releases do, glossy and smooth. Could we revert to escort for the program, she asked, voice sugared. It reads gentler for the vibe. Gannon kept his tone even. For our systems, the role must reflect truth. The approved version is printing. She glanced at me, perhaps hoping my face would blink first. I kept my hands folded and my eyes soft. I have learned that softness holds steel when it rests on a spine. David logged the interaction. The printer kept running. Lobby noise swelled and quieted the suitcase wheels, the distant clink from the tasting bar, the soft shoe squeak of a server making a careful turn. People carried on because the building had decided to. The word that did not belong to me died without ceremony. A dry leaf swept from a step. Darlie turned away with a smile clipped too tight at the corners. She typed as she walked. I watched the elevator doors meet and felt not triumph, but a steadiness I could live with a room learning to guard truth the way it guards keys. Back in my kitchen, late sun reached across the ledger and touched the cracked cup like a fingertip. I brewed tea and read the line again. Hold fast. The words had survived frost debt labor help that did not always help, and joy that sometimes cost more than it gave. Names like vines want trellis. Give them slack and they tangle. Give them wire and they climb. An email pinged. Marcia, boardroom tomorrow, 10 a.m. 3 options final. I pictured paper on glass pens, uncapped the door easing shut. No grand speeches, just choices dated and initialed. I rinsed the cup and set it to dry. Outside, the valley exhaled the day. Honeysuckle lingered by the steps. Morning would bring a table and my son's eyes moving line by line. I set 3 cream envelopes on the glass table and watched the valley float across their surfaces like a second sky. The boardroom was quiet enough to hear the copier's sleep breath and my own. Lyle and Riva sat together, shoulders almost touching their hands, not. I spoke once for each choice, nothing more. Option A, I said. Cancel with refund per contract. Vendors released room blocks, dissolved deposits, reconciled less administrative fees. I slid the first envelope forward. Option B. You proceed elsewhere under your own steam. No funds from me, no interference from me. The second envelope made a soft sound on the glass. Option C. You marry here, as planned. 1-page apology signed by you both before the ceremony. A 30-second acknowledgement at the reception stating my role in the ownership of this house. All vendor instructions through a single point of contact. I laid my palm on the third envelope, then lifted it away. Paper not pressure. Marcia's pen rested still. Carol watched the table, not my face. Outside the windows, the vines held their lines green and disciplined. Lyle cleared his throat. Why does the apology have to be public? He asked, voice low, familiar and careful. If I write to you if we talk, wouldn't that be enough? The erasure was public, I answered. The correction should match the size of the harm. 30 seconds. Your voice. I did not look at Riva when I said it. I let my son measure himself. Marcia opened the addendum. Option C includes a short statement at the reception, she said, even as a metronome. Language attached. Timing noted. Single point of contact remains the trustee alias for operational clarity. A shape moved behind the glass door. Sugar in a human frame. Darlie's profile. Carol glanced at me. I nodded once. She stepped into the corridor. The door side shut. Through the pane we heard muffled words, face vibe control. The words that build disasters when no one is brave enough to name them false. I folded my hands and kept my eyes on the page. I imagined the cracked cup at home, the rule it held for me. No calls in anger. No sentences I could not put in my ledger. I had come this far by paper and patience. I would not switch tools now. Lyle read again. He is 32 and still carries the boy who wanted to fix everything with a joke. He set the page down and looked at me. What exactly would I say? 30 seconds is forever if you mean it, I said. Something like, None of us would be here without my mother, Velma Keating, whose hands and stewardship built this home. Thank you for welcoming us into it. Tonight we honor truth, not appearances." I touched the edge of the paper, then let it go. You can choose your own words. They only have to be true. Reva's eyes shone in the flat boardroom light. No dramatics, only moisture she did not wipe away. "Lyle," she said, almost a whisper, "I want to start clean." She looked at me. "I'm willing." He breathed in, held it, let it out. "Then we choose C." He hesitated, a small boy at the kitchen threshold. "Mom, if we sign this, will you sit where we place you?" "Yes," I said. "I do not need a microphone. I need accuracy." Marcia turned the pages to the signature blocks. "Bride," she said. Riva signed first pen, steady. Groom. Lyle signed slower, trustee. I signed the acknowledgement line and wrote the date in my compact handwriting. Marcia stamped the time, a neat red square that sounded like a door closing. We drafted the exact 30 seconds. Lyle read the words, once then again. He did not revise them. Kirill came back into the room and took a chair without speaking. Her face had the clean look of someone who knows the map again. "Run of show will reflect this," she said. "I'll circulate the update to vendors and the officiant. Send the signed PDF to Gannon," I said. "Copy the alias." My voice was calm because the paper carried the heat for me. In the corridor, a sharper tone cut the air. "We'll move the wedding," Darley said to someone who did not answer fast enough. "At T-3 days, there is no inventory," Carol replied. Voice low, "We are bound to option C." Footsteps clicked away fast and small. The boardroom exhaled. We sat with the quiet for a count of 5. The copier woke and began to spit labeled sets, couple planner, venue council, officiant. I gathered the copies meant for me, squared their corners, and slid them into a folder stamped with our crest, properly licensed, properly used. Lyle stood. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, ordinary and heavy. He did not step toward me. He did not need to. There are bridges you cross without touching rails. Riva touched the envelope with our signatures as if it might bruise. "We'll be on time for rehearsal," she said. It sounded like a promise to herself. "Then the rest is logistics," I said, "and logistics are kind to honest people." We left the room one by one. The valley held its lines. The glass kept reflecting them back as if to say, "Keep yours." By dusk, the program would land in the print room. The officiant's outline would sit on top like a compass, finally pointing north. And when the rehearsal microphone woke, the first word would either honor the page or shatter in the air. I carried the folder past the annex wall where staff pin wins. Under my name, a note. Names are access. I tapped the thumbtack, a quiet salute to this house's rules kept walking. Fresh programs left the print room still warm at the edges, the paper breathing a little as I carried one copy down the hall. Gannon checked the batch with a nod, then let me go on alone. Outside, the arbor waited under strings of test lights rehearsal tape, stretching across flagstones in thin, pale lines. I did what I always do when a room might tilt, kept my hands quiet and my mouth quieter. The proof lay flat on my palm like a compass. I read the block we had agreed to, the 30 seconds that righted the map. The wind came low through the olive trees. I stood there a breath inside the hush and decided to let paper step first. Steps from the arbor, I could hear the ballroom crew testing a clean fade between songs, the sound rising and falling like a tide I did not have to command. I chose one chair at the edge of the aisle and set the program on its spine, aligned with the runner tape. Chandra called the first marks. Ben the MC lifted his mic as if this were a cruise and not a promise. They walked the outline, processional welcome vows. When he reached the acknowledgement block, his voice skimmed past it, a neat skip as if a comma had been mistaken for a period. Chandra raised one hand. Everything stopped clean as a door closing. "No," she said, calm as a librarian. "We won't run it wrong now to fix it later. We honor it now." She looked at the couple, then at Ben. He shrugged, talking about keeping it light. Chandra did not argue tone. She named the truth. The promise includes the sentence. The sentence stays. She asked them to try again. The second pass was slower. Lyle's face tightened, then eased. Riva breathed into her shoulders and squared them. Ben stood there a moment, reading the script he had tried to smooth and let the words land, all of them, without his varnish. Inside the ballroom, Nadia had her headset on and a pen between her fingers like a metronome. Gannon threw the cue sheet on the screen. I slid the exact 30 seconds across the table. Nadia highlighted the box in yellow and wrote in block letters, "Play as written." Devin had locked the teleprompter file earlier, routing edits through the trustee alias. Ben tried to joke about how audiences tune out speeches. Nadia didn't smile. "We're not entertaining," she said. "We're keeping faith." She traced the mic handoff on paper. When it moves, who holds it where the spare rests if the first misbehaves? She made notes about lights and wind in case the forecast lied. Carol came in with a softer phrasing offered like a pastry on a plate. Nadia read it, set it aside, and tapped the signed addendum pinned to her clipboard. Procedure stood between me and argument, so I didn't have to. The room itself guarded the line. I initialed the corner of the cue sheet. Ben looked at the locked screen as if it were a wall and not a tool. The fan hummed. Nadia walked a drill that made the room feel like a practiced hand usher, routes along the side aisles, the angle of the mic so it wouldn't catch the arbor, the backup battery taped under the lectern. Carol, to her credit, kept her voice even as she asked again if we could soften the line, take off the edge. Operations follow the signed addendum. Nadia answered, not unkind. Ben tried to shorten the 29 seconds to 20. The teleprompter refused to scroll on his edit, locked by IT. He laughed once the sounds small in so much carpet. I didn't need to say anything. I signed the cue sheet and stepped away. The DJ blinked. The house lights ran a dimmer test. The sentence sat in the board's middle, fixed as a switch. The room protected what paper had promised. Enough. A cart rolled. In the lobby, a small envelope waited with my name in a neat square hand. Inside lay Daniel's ledger page, the one Maura had loaned. Riva returned without a crease. Hold fast was circled in pencil, once no hearts, no arrows. A sticky note held to the corner with a single word in Riva's ink, understood. No flourish, no apology. Understanding is quieter than that. I slid the page into my folder for the walk home, and on a whim tucked a copy under the concierge bell the way sailors used to leave letters with keepers. The brass rang once bright as a coin. I didn't ask anyone to witness it. I didn't need a witness. The winter notation Daniel used 3 tiny dots for wait 1 day, then act sat below the margin. I touched them. So much of a life is small marks. No one claps for a valve, checked a payroll, signed a vine cut back at dusk. I took one breath and let the room be a room. Yet, as we powered down the ballroom, my phone pulsed. A text from Lyle Mom. "Can we walk the rows at sunrise? I need to say this right." I didn't reply in the thread. I sent an old map of rows 12 through 14 and set an alarm. The rest could wait for the vines. Outside, the sky wore thin silver. I locked my office, pocketed the map, and let the place go quiet. Rehearsal had obeyed the page. Morning would ask for a heart to match it. At the concierge desk, the cracked cup caught the lobby light. I turned that line toward the door, a quiet reminder. Then I stepped into the portico, listened to the fountain, and went home. Tomorrow tests us. Dawn lifted like breath over row 12. I met Lyle where the ground still glittered 2 paper cups of tea, warming our hands, Daniel's ledger page folded in my pocket. The wires wore a thin frost. The valley held its tongue. He did not try a hug, did not joke. I texted because I want to say it right, not pretty, he said. We stood in the dirt that grew as baby vines. I pointed at the green tie holding cane to trellis. Short and true holds the fruit, I said. He nodded, watching the sun lift a hard shine off the wire. I let the quiet speak first. No rescue, no rewrite. When he was ready, he looked up. "Tell me where to begin." I tipped tea toward Frost. Steam rose stubborn. Begin with what happened, not why I said. Why can wait. A bird clicked in the oak by the lane. The day felt like held breath, the kind you take before naming something that has to be named. He pulled a note and tried it aloud. "I'm sorry," he began, and flinched as if the wire bit him. "An apology is for the letter," I said. "The microphone is for truth." He tried again, stacking sorries until the sentence sank. "Name labor, not guilt. Name stewardship, not shame. Name the rule of one voice for this house." He stared at the row, then nodded. Past, present, future, he murmured as if testing a key. We built the block together, past what Daniel and I built. Present, who holds signature. Future, how he will stand beside his wife. He read it, breath steadying. "I chased ease," he said. "I liked being liked. Ease won't keep a trellis up," I said. "Short and true will." We practiced rhythm, not volume, no lists, no heat, just 30 seconds that could stand. He tried it toward the lane, then the vines. Each time the words felt less like penance and more like a handle. By the fourth pass, his voice carried without heat. He lowered the page. "That's the one," he said. I nodded. The sun found the wire and turned it to light. "Okay." We walked to the cooperage where the air smells of toast and stone. He thumped a cask the way he did at 10, and the wood answered with the same note. I unfolded the ledger and placed it in his palm. Daniel's ink circling 2 words, "Hold fast." "Don't weaponize me," I said. "Just name me." He traced the circle with his thumb slow. "Where will you sit, middle row?" I said. "Present, not center." A forklift beeped somewhere beyond the wall. Harvest was months away, yet the room kept its habits. We stood long enough for chill to lift from boards. "I thought being easy kept peace," he said. "It keeps quiet," I answered. "Peace likes the truth." He slid the page back to me and squared his shoulders as if a strap had been tightened. I folded the paper once and put it away. The note felt heavier. He kept it a beat. Riva came down the row with wind-tangled hair, a jacket borrowed from someone taller. She lifted a hand in greeting, cautious, then stopped beside Lyle. He offered her the paper. She read the addendum language, once eyes still, and said, "I can do hard things in daylight." We ran the 30 seconds. Lyle's voice first steady now, then her single line. I add my thanks. No flourishes, no apology on the mic, names and tasks in order. A hawk made a circle and moved on. I told my mother we were choosing the house, not the hashtag. I nodded once. "Accuracy over ease," I said. "It keeps a place standing." "Truth is the vibe," she echoed from rehearsal, a small smile that did not ask me to join it. I reminded them no lists, no heat. Keep eyes on each other. They practiced breath timing and who hands the mic. By the last pass, they sounded like a pair who had learned to carry one sentence together without dropping it. The ridge kept its counsel. In the inn kitchen, steam fogged the panes, while Chef Luke lifted a small tureen to pass. Onion soup layered slow the way Daniel loved stock dark onions, patient Gruyere blistered kissed with brandy. He ladled a taste into 3 cups. Lyle watched my face instead of the spoon. Luke said, "A quiet first course in Daniel's honor. Unannounced. We can call it row 12. Riva touched the rim. Would that be too heavy? "Some weight steady a table," I said. Luke noted the course on his whiteboard with a square box for timing and service count. Backline moved like a tide, quiet steady. The soup landed like memory with heat and patience. Lyle exhaled. Riva nodded. No toast, no spotlight. Just a bowl that let a room remember without instruction. Luke set a second note, no crest, on the menu card, only the name of the row. I thanked him. A house holds best when it doesn't brag. In the doorway, Gannon gave a thumbs up and disappeared, already counting chairs somewhere else. We stood, listened to stove tick, and let the lesson rest. Okay. As we left, my phone buzzed. Gannon had sent a photo of ballroom A40 chairs set. Cords coiled, one microphone lit with a small green eye. "House is ready," he wrote. At home, I set my cracked cup beside my keys, slid the ledger page under it, and shut the kitchen light with the back of my knuckle. The lane hummed once as a car passed and went quiet again. Tomorrow the valley would hold its breath, and 30 words would decide the weather inside a room. I stood in the doorway counting my 3 rules, then let the dark take the wall. Slowly I took the seat I had chosen days ago, middle row center aisle, where the arbor framed the valley like a kept promise. Sunlight fell in, sifted threads through the leaves, catching the edge of the white chairs and the curve of the microphone stand. The quartet hushed. You could hear linen breathe. Chandra lifted her book, found me with a small nod, and began. I folded my hands and matched my breath to the music. I was present, not central. That was the point. The vows moved like water over stones, steady and exact. When the cue lamp blinked, Ben turned toward the mic, then to Lyle. On Nadia's tablet, the block glowed, "Play as written." The teleprompter held the words we had signed. Lyle's hand rose a fraction, unsteady, then settled. I watched the boy I raised step into the voice of a husband. "None of us would be here," he said without my mother, Velma Keating, whose hands and stewardship built this home. She taught me the rule that keeps a house standing, one voice for the work, truth over ease. Today, Riva and I promise to hold to that rule. He looked at me only at the end, not asking, simply anchoring. Riva lifted the second mic. "I add my thanks," she said, warm and clear. The room breathed with me. No one clapped. They didn't need to. The correction was the applause. At the aisle's edge, a figure leaned forward. Darlie spoke quickly to Ben, urging him to keep moving to shave the seconds. Ben touched his earpiece. The script would not scroll. Nadia took one even step into the aisle and said, "We're in the acknowledgement." Chandra's palm hovered, stilling the air. The house did what it had been trained to do. Darlie drew back to the doorway, recognizing there was no seam to pick, no panel to lift. I did not stand. The paper and the people carried the weight exactly as designed. The recessional turned and the valley exhaled. In the reception hall, candles steadied the tables, and Chef Luke's Row 12 soup arrived as a quiet first course. There was no announcement, only stalk dark as walnut onions that had learned patience, and a thread of cheese catching the spoon. Across the room, Lyle passed behind my chair and tapped it once with 2 fingers. Not a scene, only a vow in miniature. Riva's toast named craft steadiness and the grace of being corrected. No one tried to add sparkle where the truth already shone. After dessert, I stepped into the in-office with Gannon. The copier light blinked like a lighthouse. We signed what carries a story forward, the Daniel Keating Scholarship for Field Families and Kitchen Apprentices, the clause that fixes a single point of contact for any event that bears our name, the note that offers Nadia a permanent seat at operations. No triumph there, just ink where it belonged. I left a copy for Lyle with a line in my hand, "Standards protect love." Evening slowed on the porch. The hill line burned thin and orange, the rows darkening until the wires were silver threads against the last light. Guests crossed the gravel in soft pairs. Laughter eased without tipping. I let my shoulders fall and thought of the kitchen at home, the ledger on its old clip, the cracked cup where I leave the day to cool. We had not shouted. We had not stormed the stage. We had simply refused to be erased. Chandra crossed the porch and stood beside me, quiet a moment. "It is a mercy when truth requires so few words," she said. 30 seconds, I answered, and a lifetime. She smiled, then went back inside to return her book to its box. Nadia waved from the doorway. Gannon lifted his chin like a sentry starting the easy watch. I walked through the empty lobby and paused at the annex wall. David's sheet names are access pinned above the mini proof with my role highlighted. Beneath it, he had added a strip from the old ledger Maura kept, "Hold fast." It looked like a small lesson board in a school that would not close. I touched the thumbtack once and left it there. On the path home, the gravel gave its clean, familiar sound. In the kitchen, I set my keys down and placed the cracked cup where it always waits. I slid the folded copy of the scholarship letter beneath it, paper under porcelain under habit. The house was quiet in a chosen way. Somewhere out in the dark, the wires cooled, and the fruit they would carry kept its own schedule. I spoke once to the valley and to anyone who has ever been asked to vanish for the comfort of others. We kept our name. We kept our work. We kept our door. And because of that, the people who needed shelter could find it without asking whose shadow they stood in. If you're listening from far away, take that into your week. Quiet is not absence. Quiet is choice, and it can set a table that feeds more than one wound. At the reception doorway, Darlie stood for a minute, framed by the lanterns, looking in like a guest who had misplaced her card. Her face held that practiced calm I knew too well, the kind made of will and hairspray. She scanned the room for an angle the system might have missed, and found none. Ben ran the schedule to the minute. Nadia drifted between stations like a harbor pilot. Gannon reset the mic stands with ordinary grace. Darlie caught my eye and lifted her chin in a brittle greeting. I returned it with a nod that said nothing and everything. She turned away at last. Inside, spoons rang the bowls, and the quartet slid into a quieter hymn. Looking back, one truth holds: quiet is a choice, not a surrender. Put standards on paper. Keep your voice steady and let character, not volume, carry the day. In families and at work, clarity protects love. If someone asks you to disappear for their comfort, stay present with dignity and let the record speak. My lesson to younger hearts and to tired elders' boundaries are an act of care. Apologies heal. Accountability keeps wounds from reopening. If this story touched you, type 1, or tell me where you're watching from. If it missed, say, why I'm listening. Subscribe for more American stories. We'll keep the porch light on. Keep receipts breathe first and leave only when truth requires it. Go.